Okay, calm down.
As someone who obviously served prison time, what do you want people to know about that experience, especially as we're talking about people who are facing prison time now?
Wow, where do you even begin? The U.S. Prison system at every level, at the federal level, the state level, and local levels, is utterly and completely broken. I did a piece just a week ago for Consortium News in which I went over, just as a random sampling, 15 or 20 prison guards that have been arrested in the last 2 years. About a third of them have been arrested for raping prisoners, both female and male. The other 2/3 have been arrested for smuggling into prisons cell phones and drugs, in many cases, hard drugs that ended up killing prisoners that they were selling the drugs to. The system is completely broken. You know, there's a book that was written by Dr. Peter Moskos of John Jay College School of Criminal Justice. It's called In Defense of Flogging, which is kind of a tongue-in-cheek title. But he makes a conclusion that I think is very, very important in this book. He says that at the federal level, the Federal Bureau of Prisons really is nothing more than an employment agency for otherwise unemployable, undereducated, rural white men. These are guys who couldn't make it in the military. These are guys who were flunkies from the local police academy and just couldn't make a career out of law enforcement. And in the United States, our prisons are almost entirely in rural areas, and they serve as the only sources of jobs and thus of income for a lot of rural white men. Well, do you know what the qualifications are for a prison guard in America? And I mean this quite literally. You need a GED and no felony convictions. And that's it. It's no wonder that they turn to corruption and drugs and smuggling and rape and end up committing suicide and beating people and abusing people and standing by while they commit suicide. And again, the entire system is broken. It needs to be scrapped and rebuilt. Let me get, still standing on my soapbox here. Until Ronald Reagan was elected president, you could go to prison in the United States, and with good behavior, you could get out on federal parole. There is no federal parole anymore, thanks to the so-called Prison Reform Act of 1986. Now, you get 5 years or you get 10 years, you're doing 5 years or 10 years. Time also used to be where you could go to prison and learn a skill. You could learn to be a plumber or an electrician, or you could fix engines, or, whatever, learn how to do whatever, landscaping. Well, they don't do any of that anymore. So let's say, as an example, you're doing 5 years or 10 years on a drug charge. They don't teach you how to read and write. They don't give you classes so you can pass the time. They don't give you a skill that you can then adopt as a vocation when you get out. They send you straight back to the neighborhood that you came from. And you are not only no better off than you were when you went to prison, but now you have PTSD and you're pissed off.
Right.
And so what are you going to do? You're going to do the only thing you know how to do, and that is to sell drugs again. When I was released, I was released first to a halfway house called Hope Village in Washington. It is now defunct for good reason. We used to call it Abandon All Hope Village. There were 220 men in this facility. There was one, count it, there was one job that was posted on the bulletin board, and it was to be a dishwasher at Fuddruckers. And there were 220 guys beating the hell out of each other to get that one dishwasher job, because once you had the job, you could then transfer to your home and then have permission to leave home to go to the dishwasher job. Broken with a capital B.
And then, of course, our it's also broken in terms of who is convicted in the first place, because you had the honor
yeah.
of being sent to prison. The only person sent to prison over the CIA torture program was not the person who, not a person who tortured people, but it was someone who exposed it.
Yeah, my first couple days in prison were eye-opening. As I would walk past the guards, they would whisper, "Traitor," which I'm sure they had all been sort of prompted to do.
Sure.
And how did they want me to react? Did they want me to like take a swing at them
Right.
so that they could send me to solitary? The first couple times I just kind of chuckled, like, whatever, dope. And then after that, I just ignored them until they stopped doing it. But yeah, you're right. There were a lot of things that I had to learn very quickly in prison. Number one was that it's like walking into 1950s America, in that literally everything is divided along racial lines. Everything. There are blacks, whites, and Hispanics. And if you don't fit neatly into one of those categories, then you better squeeze yourself into one of those categories.
Where do the Greek Americans go?
Yeah, I sat with the Italians, which were an extension of the whites, which really were the Aryans. So what you have to do on your very first day is you have to show your paperwork, which colloquially means you have to prove that you're not a pedophile. So I showed my paperwork. I'm not in on a child sex charge. So I was allowed to sit with the Aryans. And the Aryan section in the cafeteria was divided between honest to God Nazis and then what were called good guys. That is white guys who were not pedophiles. Next to them were the Italians. The Italians, of course, all sat together. And my second year in prison, I was invited to sit with the Italians. So I moved over there. And I mean Italians named Gambino, Bonanno, Lucchesi, Genovese. You get the idea. And then there was a table of Native Americans. And then on the white side, all the other tables were pedophiles and rats. The rats had to sit with pedophiles. The other half of the cafeteria was all black. And whites couldn't sit over there, and blacks couldn't sit on the white side. Well, in the TV room, the day room, I was one of the people who chose to ignore those racial divisions. They just never made sense to me. And so I was lucky, not realizing it at the time. I was lucky in the very beginning of my prison sentence that I was in a cell with both black guys and Mexican guys. And when I showed that I wasn't a rat and I wasn't a pedophile and I was educated, so I'm happy to help you write your appeal, which you're going to lose anyway, but I'm happy to help you write it. Then I got the thumbs up from all the different racial groups and everything was cool.
Wow. That's insane.
It was hard.
Wow. And you were there 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, 23 months. So just barely under 2 years.